Hi, I'm John from Just Music. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you do, give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. And if you're feeling generous, I have a PayPal link in the description below with my email address in there, or if you'd like to contact me. And check out my other channel, Just Whiskey, without the E. But today's show is an album review from a blast from the past. Frank Zappa, Apostrophe. I'm going to do track by track and tell you a little bit my experience with this album. Wow. This album is probably in my top 10 albums of all time. Why is that? It has to do with memories, right? So this album came out in 1974, and I started listening to it with my neighborhood friends probably the end of 1975 into 1976. That's when I discovered marijuana. And so me and my neighborhood friends, I won't mention names, right? Back then it was so taboo. Now it's legal, right? But almost every night we'd go over to one of my friend's house with the black light and the black light posters, and we would just smoke pot and listen to albums and maybe drink a couple of Miller High Life beers, right? And this was one of those albums that we listened to over and over and over and over again, probably hundreds of times throughout 1975 and 1976. And even though this was a fairly new record back then, to me, it felt old. It just did. And there's some incredible players on this album. Just to name a couple. Jack Bruce from Cream plays bass on this album. And Jean-Luc Ponty plays violin on this album. And Frank Zappa plays all guitars and all lead vocals, except for the song Apostrophe, where Tony Duran plays rhythm guitar, but Frank plays lead on that. And it's got a little statement on here. It says, "This is an album of songs and stories set to music performed for your dining and dancing pleasure by FZ and some of the people he likes to record with. At various points on this disc, you will hear performances of," and then there's got to be a couple of dozen musicians on here. But Jack Bruce and Jean-Luc Ponty are probably the two most famous ones that are on here. And it's manufactured by Warner Brothers, but it was on the Discreet label, which I believe was probably Frank Zappa's label, which he probably sold rights to Warner Brothers. Because my understanding is Frank Zappa owned, and his family still owns, all the rights, copyrights to everything he's ever done from the get-go. So a little history on this. So this came out in 1974. Prior to that, in 1973 to 1974, was Overnight Sensation. And the critics say that these two albums were recorded in the same time frame, but released as two separate albums. Although I really like Overnight Sensation, Apostrophe is a masterpiece and is just so close to my heart. And also, too, what I have here, there's a DVD, but you can probably, these days, right, stream it, Google it on YouTube. But it's Frank Zappa, and it's called Classic Albums. They probably showed this on MTV 30 years ago. But basically, it's a documentary on Overnight Sensation and Apostrophe. And they have some bonus footage on there with some live footage, as well as Frank Zappa band performing The Slime on Saturday Night Live in 1976. So this is really cool. Billy Bob Thornton's on here, and Steve Vai, Frank Zappa, Moon Zappa, Dweezil Zappa. It's a very cool documentary. Back to Apostrophe. So it opens up with Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, which, even if you're not a Frank Zappa fan, you probably heard of the song. But that kind of sets the tone of this album. And what's cool about this album is each song weaves into the next. So it's in a way it's a concept album, but it just weaves all together perfectly. And so Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, then Nanook Rubs It, then St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast, and then that weaves into Father Oblivion, which is really an extension of St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast. It's like part 2. It's really the same song, if you ask me. And then Cosmic Debris. Oh my God. Incredible lead guitar work on Cosmic Debris. Incredible. Unbelievable. Then side 2 is Eccentrifugal Force, which is a very short song. And then that leads into Apostrophe, which is a instrumental. And then it goes into Uncle Remus, which is a really cool song. And then it goes into Stinkfoot. It's a perfect album. I absolutely love this, and that's why I dedicated the show to it. And I did see Frank Zappa. It was 1980 and 1981. It was very disappointing for me. He only really played 3 songs, and the rest of the time he conducted like this jazz orchestra, his band. He conducted them. It was very weird, and looking back, I wish I had. He was way ahead of my time. I wasn't ready for that concert, and so my cousin Tom says it's his favorite concert of all time, or at least, so for me it was one of the most disappointing, because I was hoping to hear a bunch of songs, and I just heard a bunch of jazz with some songs, but I just wasn't in the Frank Zappa zone that night. And also too, a funny little tidbit about the only reason why I went to that concert is because back then there was no internet, and I heard and so all these concerts were advertised on the radio station. Don Law Presents. A promoter would promote these on the radio, and I thought they said Black Sabbath tickets on sale today or tomorrow. This would have been, back in 1980. But it was Frank Zappa. But the way it was muffled and it was said so quick, so I flew down to the Providence Civic Center and I waited in line thinking I'm going to get Black Sabbath tickets. And then I realized it's not Black Sabbath, it's Frank Zappa. And I'm like, hey, what the hell? I'll buy 2 tickets. And so that had something to do with it, probably. So a little Frank Zappa. I've never met the man. I did see him in concert. But here's a cool picture, all right? This is in 2010. I'm gonna get the in 2010. That's me backstage with my friend Jim Langlois at the Met in Providence, November of 2010, backstage, and we met and talked with Leon Redbone. And I was pretty lit up that night, had a few beers, and we just snuck backstage and knocked on the door, and he answered, and he didn't throw us out. He let us in, and he signed a CD for me and drew a little picture on there, which I still have. And I asked him, because he was from that era of Frank Zappa, and I said, hey, I know you're aware of Frank Zappa, and I know you were in some of the same circles as him back in the day. And I said, do you have anything to, like, what's your take on Frank Zappa? And Leon Redbone said in his voice, the man is a complete nutcase. So maybe so, but aren't all geniuses a little bit nutty? Frank Zappa was a true genius, and check out this documentary. It'll be well worth your time. And Tom, you're going to be borrowing this when you come see me next week. But anyway, just a blast from the past down memory lane. And I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, thumbs up, like, and subscribe. And rock on, everybody. And listen to some Frank Zappa, like Shake Your Booty and Joe's Garage, two of my other favorite Frank Zappa albums. And we'll get to them at some point. All right, take care, everybody.